All right, welcome back to Rewatch or Return, the podcast where we put movies through the ultimate test across 10 universal categories to decide, does it call for a definite rewatch, a definite trip to the return bin, or does our subjectivity cause it to fall somewhere in between? I think this is going to be the first time that we jump into an actual television series on here rather than a movie, or whatever you want to call it, a feature film, because it has just come out and it's quite popular and it's fairly short and easy to, kind of get through in a day or 2 days if you want. I decided to do Spider-Noir this time around. So the new Nicolas Cage kind of Sony Spider-Verse series that came out on Amazon. Don't know. We'll get into. I'm not going to say too much here from the start because we'll get into more as we go. But we're going to be. This is going to be the first kind of television mini series or first season of television. I'm just going to cover the whole season in one whack here. But with that said, let's check out the Rotten Tomatoes synopsis of the whole entire series here. Very quick, short, kind of one-sentence deal. Private Eye Ben Reilly is living easy and lazy until mobsters, monsters, and a femme fatale drag him back to his former life as New York's only superhero. All right, now we're going to jump into a fast-forward facts, quick narrative rundown of the history and facts behind the series. Here we are in 2026, and one of the most unexpected superhero projects in years has finally arrived. Forget colorful costumes, multiverse chaos, and sky beams. Spider-Noir trades all of that for trench coats, cigarette smoke, corruption, and a rain-soaked New York straight out of a 1930s detective novel. Released as an 8-episode binge series on Prime Video, Spider-Noir brings one of Marvel's strangest alternate universe characters into live action for the very first time. The series stars Nicolas Cage, who reprises a version of the character he previously voiced in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This time, however, Cage plays Ben Reilly, a worn-down private investigator and former masked vigilante known simply as the Spider. Living in a corrupt version of 1930s New York, Reilly is pulled back into action when a new conspiracy threatens the city he once protected. The supporting cast includes Brendan Gleeson as crime boss Silvermane, Lee Jun Lee as Cat Hardy, the series' noir-inspired take on Black Cat, and Jack Huston as Flint Marko, better known to comic fans as Sandman. One of the coolest behind-the-scenes facts is that the entire series was released in 2 versions, a traditional color presentation and an authentic black and white version. In fact, Nicolas Cage has said his performance was designed with black and white viewing in mind, allowing the show to fully embrace the visual style of classic detective films from Hollywood's golden age. The show was developed by Oren Uziel and Stephen Lightfoot, with producers Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, and Amy Pascal helping guide the project. Those names should sound familiar because they're the creative minds behind much of the modern Spider-Verse franchise. Behind the camera, the production leaned heavily into practical sets, period costumes, vintage automobiles, and the dramatic noir lighting. The results feel less like a traditional Marvel show and more like a mashup of classical detective stories and superhero mythology. Critics praised the unique tone, with early reviews landing around the 90% range on Rotten Tomatoes, and highlighting Cage's performance as one of the show's biggest strengths. Perhaps the biggest surprise is how little the series relies on modern superhero conventions. Instead of building toward universe-ending stakes, Spider-Noir focuses on murder mysteries, mob wars, personal redemption, and the consequences of a hero trying to outrun his past. It proves that a Spider-Man story doesn't need flashy gadgets or Avengers cameos to be compelling. Whether you're a longtime comic reader or just someone who enjoys a good detective story, Spider-Noir stands out as one of the boldest superhero adaptations in years. It takes a character who was once a quirky alternative universe footnote and turns him into the star of a stylish crime saga. And if there's one thing this series proves, it's that even in the darkest corners of New York, a Spider-Man story can still feel fresh, especially when it's wearing a fedora. And a little bonus fact for you, this marks Nicolas Cage's first lead role in a live-action television series despite a film career spanning more than 4 decades. For a lot of viewers, that alone was reason enough to press play. All right. We're going to jump into what the critics said here, but it's going to be a little bit different. And only because what we would usually do here is look at the first top 10 critic reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. However, there are no reviews, period, on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a score. Your tomato meter is 92%. A popcorn meter is 93%. So your scores are super duper high. But because there are no reviews directly off of Rotten Tomatoes, I don't want to completely forego or pass up or just not do reviews at all. So I have found a site with some reviews. Some of them are from different websites. Some of them are from individual people. But we're going to jump into these reviews real fast. The first one says, a marvelous mesh of style, homage, and deconstruction. Spider-Noir is the year's top TV treat so far. The next one says, amazing. Enough said, this show has some great moments and really feels like an old cheesy detective show from the mid-1900s. If you're a Spider-Man fan, it nails that too, with a lot of Spider-Verse references, and Nick Cage plays him in both. So yeah, it's pretty good. Another one says, stylish, amusing, and action-packed. It's a standalone tale of spectacular proportions. And then we have another one which says, this was a breath of fresh air, very enjoyable, Cage at his best, highly recommend, watch it in black and white. Let's see, the next one says, the whole is fast enough and funny enough to get away with it. Everything is shot with a style and confidence, while the script contains just enough sharp dialogue with witty banter to keep it aligned with the templates of the past. The next one says, I loved the spin on this Spidey universe. I was skeptical about Nick Cage being the Spider, much better than expected. Then we have one that says, it's a sharp, often funny binge show anchored by Nicolas Cage's go-for-broke performance as Ben Reilly, a.k.a. the Spider. The next one says, I really feel that it could have been something. However, Cage was not the right choice for the role, this one says. The next one says, not only in terms of the action, which was never expected to be quite on the same level as movies with much bigger budgets, but also in how certain emotional moments did not have quite the same punch, or a few villains ended up being more generic than expected. Still, Spider-Noir is a winning story for this new live-action side of Spider-Man, and hopefully it can continue to improve with a second season and more. And then the very last one here, number 10, says, I am a fan of Nicolas Cage, but so far the series felt clunky, boring, and hard to understand what's going on at the screen. Okay. Anyway, those are your not necessarily top 10 critics, but those are the first 10 reviews, period, that I found on a review site that had kind of brought in many reviews from many different websites and things. But for the most part, this has been highly reviewed, given high scores. It's been very well liked by critics and very well liked by an audience, which is very positive. But that there is what the critics said, or that there is what the reviews that I have just read you said, that is. Moving on to first time or 50th, generally, this is where we would talk about, is this your first time to watch something, or have you seen this thing several times, or whatever. Obviously, this just came out as the day that this releases, being a Tuesday. I just watched this starting. It came out this past Friday, so watched the first 4 episodes Friday night. Watched the 5 and 6 on Saturday, and then watched 7 and 8 on Sunday. But definitely a first time watch because this thing just came out. I say that though to say it made me. I watched it in black and white, and it made me want to go back and watch it in color. I think this will be a fun show to go back and watch over again, being that it's just a quick 8 episode series, and they're all in that kind of 40-minute ish time frame. It'd be a fun one to go back and watch and see what I missed the first time around, see what I can pick up, see what kind of Easter eggs or references maybe that I wasn't quite paying enough attention to. Obviously, being a Spider-Man show, there are little things in it that that refer to the character or the lore, or the comic spread across however many years this comic has been, this character has existed, and this world has existed, and this universe has existed, or whatever. I'm sure there's stuff and references that I missed throughout this series as I was watching that I would like to go back now. I would like to go back and watch it in color now that I've seen it in black and white, and I would like to also see what potentially that I missed in the process. But yeah, obviously, brand new situation, brand new show, and so I've only watched it once, but I will probably watch through it again sometime pretty soon. Moving on to be continued. Would a sequel work, and if there is, should there have been? Well, obviously this is a series, and so we're not talking necessarily film sequel kind of stuff here, but I guess the proper application to this would be, should there be a season 2, and if so, would it work? And I think definitely the way that this was ended, the way that this ended, the series anyway, the way that this season ended, I don't know if this is just going to be a one-off kind of mini-series kind of deal, or if this is just going to be, if this is going to be the beginning of a few seasons. We don't know yet. I know that Nicolas Cage has said that he's totally up for it. I think whoever that directed this or was a producer, well, I mean, you had a handful of producers, but I'm sure Sony, with the success that this has had so far, the scores are not going to go down, obviously. I mean, anybody that was going to watch it, it's been probably primarily watched by most of the people who were waiting for this to come out. So I don't think the scores are really going to change. I think you're going to stay above 90% on your scores above across the board as far as your Rotten Tomato critic and audience scores. So I think Sony saw this as a very successful thing. So you got the folks over at Sony, then you've got Lord and Miller, who were the creators and the ones behind the Into the Spider-Verse couple of movies. This is a character that's kind of they brought in as part of that. So you have those guys who I think very much are on board, I'm sure, to see this continue. And then you've got Nicolas Cage, who said he's totally up for it. And after having kind of a successful first go at television, is going to be is on board to now do more. After he was kind of leery of I'm not really sure how well this is going to go. So I think there is more than likely, I think that we will see a second season of this. I don't know how soon it will be. I don't know how quickly they can jump on that. But I definitely think there will be a second season. And I think with the success of the first season, they'd be silly to not give it another season. Now, I don't know that this needs to be a long running thing. But I think the change of pace from the typical superhero genre or the typical style of superhero stuff, I think the change of pace into if you make this, if you go into a second season with this and you make it more, you lean heavy into that, the detective, private investigator side of things, and don't get too wild with it and stay true to what you're trying to do, I think that this could be, just could continue to be a really popular series. And I think 2 or 3 seasons of this would be very smart on their part. But yeah, I think you will see another season. I think there should be another season of this, and I think that everybody involved is on board for another season. I think it was set up to be able to obviously continue this. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the whole to be continued portion of this. All right, with that down, before we jump into the final segment, today's episode is brought to you by PrepStartsNow.com, your go-to spot for emergency and outdoor preparedness. If you're anything like me, you'd rather be prepared and not need it than need the essentials and not have them. From 72-hour emergency essentials to camping gear, car emergency essentials, multi-tools, first aid, and even home gardening supplies as you start to grow some of your own food, they've got you covered for all of it. And the best part is, as a listener, you can use the promo code REWATCH to get a 15% site-wide discount. And you'll also be helping out the show as they give us a small reward for your business in the process. Head to prepstartsnow.com/discount/rewatch. That's prepstartsnow.com/discount/rewatch, or simply enter the code rewatch and get at checkout and get prepared today. All right, let's jump into a quick recap of the series, and I don't want to go into too much detail at all because I have tried to do this once already that you have not seen, and I have gotten so bogged down in details that I kind of lose track of where I'm going and forget things. It's hard to recap an entire series in one whack with any kind of detail. So I'm just going to literally touch just minor points and give you kind of like a basic understanding of what this series was about, or what this season was about. So it starts off where Ben lost a loved one, his wife, and so he's not been the Spider for 5 years. He's basically been a drunk private detective for 5 years, not able to hardly get by, not really being able to pay his assistant hardly, just kind of living in depression or whatever, just trying to get by and struggling with what happened in the loss of his wife. Through a series of events, he's forced to take a case. He's kind of forced to start showing his spider ability again. And throughout the series, he is hesitant to, do what he knows he should be doing. He kind of just wants to be the lazy drunk guy but he starts investigating. He starts using his powers a little bit. He finds out there's some other people with powers. The city mobster is using those guys for his own dirty work. You find out that there's a doctor who is trying to cure these people with these abilities, who got these abilities. All of them were experimented on in Germany, I guess, in the war. I think it was Germany where they were at. It may have been somewhere in France. Anyway, it was during World War I. So all of these people that have abilities, including Ben, because something happened to them in the war at a place where people were being experimented on. So this doctor wants to find a cure because her son was one of those people, and she's wanting to cure her son. And she uses Ben in a way to kind of use his blood and some tissue from him or whatever to create an antidote. And then by the end of the movie, by the end of the series, you are in a situation where Ben has an antidote to rid these people of their powers, or the thing that is actually killing them, because while they're getting stronger and stronger, it's beginning to also kill them in the process. So you have basically the two major people. One is Sandman, Flint Marko. One is the equivalent to like an Electro character, and I can't remember what the other guy's like. This, I don't know what he is. Some kind of like crab type of very kind of exoskeleton, real strong and impermeable skin or whatever. I don't know what he's supposed to be. That's a character I'm not real familiar with, or maybe I just didn't quite understand what he was supposed to be. But anyway, all of those guys are getting stronger, but their mutation is also killing them. It's not killing Ben. For whatever reason, Ben is not being killed, so that's why the doctor wants to use him to figure out how she can save them. Like, why? How can I? Anyway, so that happens. Ben ends up with an antidote by the end of the series. The mob boss has basically kind of found out that Ben, who he's been paying to help him, Ben has been helping him even though he's not. the mob boss finds out basically that Ben is the Spider. Robbie, the character who's played by Lamorne Morris, who's an investigative reporter, shows up and pretends to be the Spider so that Ben isn't found out in the situation that they're in. But ultimately, by the end of the film, or by the end of the series, Ben is trying to get this antidote in these other guys who ultimately don't want it, but then also he's trying to help them, but they're trying to kill him, and it becomes a whole situation by the end where one of them ends up dying in a fight, and the other two are saved by the antidote. And by the end of the series, Ben is kind of, I know it's all kind of surface level and maybe not even real descriptive, but if you've seen the series, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the series, I don't really want to give too much away, because if you watch this and you haven't seen it yet, I don't really want these episodes or these, I don't want what I'm saying on any of these to necessarily completely and totally give a film away to somebody, or give a series away or whatever to somebody who hasn't seen it. So, by the end of the series, Ben has kind of gotten out of his 5-year slump where he's not using his spider abilities. His business has picked up. His assistant is now working with him in kind of a partnership capacity at the agency. Lamorne Morris's character, Robbie, has now started his own newspaper. Everybody has been either eliminated or saved as far as the mutated people. The mob boss has been killed, and it's kind of a sort of a everybody lives happily ever after ending. Like everything's worked out. Everybody's where they were trying to get to, except for the bad people. So, yeah, it's set up to be able to continue on if wanted. But basically, there's this big character arc of Ben being a drunk, having given up his kind of duties or responsibility as a spider, and then throughout the arc, he is kind of pulled back into having to do those things, and then gets to a point where a realization where he's all right. I need to straighten up, and I have a responsibility here as the spider to do right by my assistant when it comes to my day job, and to also help people with my abilities that I have. And that's kind of how things end. But anyway, that may be clear as mud. And if you've seen the thing, hopefully I didn't give too much away. And then hopefully also it was enough where those of you who have seen it, or want to see it, or are either pulled in and wanting to watch the show, and then, if you've seen it, and hopefully I didn't say something completely stupid or say something that was way off. But anyway, that's a quick recap of the series. And with that down, we're going to jump into the final verdict, where we put in this case, the series to the test across 10 categories, scored on a scale from 1 to 5, and that scale looks like this. 1 is poor, 2 is weak, 3 is fair, 4 is good, and 5 is excellent. And then your scale, as far as how these points add up, is a scale from 1 to 50. Anything from 10 to 20 is a return it and maybe rewind out of pity. Anything from a 20 to 30 is return worthy unless you're feeling nostalgic. Anything from 30 to 40 is a leans rewatch but debatable. And anything from 40 to 50 is certified rewatchable. So we will now jump into the first category, story and plot. Is the narrative compelling and coherent? Does it still hold up on a rewatch? Well, this has not been rewatched yet, but I do think that the narrative is compelling and coherent. It makes total sense. There were kind of 2 episodes in there where it veered off a bit. Not in a way that didn't make sense. It just kind of like got off of the main story to give you a little bit more information about a couple things, and then got back on track with, all right, now that we've established these other couple of things, we're going to jump back into kind of the main storyline and continue on. So, but that didn't mess anything up. That was just sort of they kind of paused, hopped over to another little bit of explanation or backstory or side story, and then hopped back onto the main tracks. It didn't affect anything, and it didn't feel off, anything like that. But yes, the narrative is compelling and coherent. I haven't rewatched it yet, but I think that they did a good job with the story. I don't think there were like any ridiculous, plot points or anything that was silly or anything like that. I think they did a good job of playing there wasn't just a whole lot of spider stuff in the thing. It was more detective story leaning, which I could appreciate. So for story and plot, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 and say that it was solid, good, works well, not necessarily iconic, but I think they did a good job with the story and plot. It was compelling and kind of made you want to keep going and finding out what's going on. And made sense along the way. For a spider superhero character story set in the 30s in a noir vibe. Moving on to characters and performances. Are the characters memorable and well acted, or forgettable and flat? Well, first of all, I think anything that Nicolas Cage does is memorable. I used to think a particular way about Nicolas Cage. The funny thing is, like, Nicolas Cage is very meme. He's kind of seen as this meme, as this internet meme now, and kind of is this like bombastic, kind of wild, and like there's a particular Nicolas Cage thing that people think of, but also he has played those roles, but he also has played completely and totally normal people who don't feel Nicolas Cage. He's just playing a normal person. So it's not like he can't act unless he's playing a wild and crazy character. It's just that he's really good at playing a wild and crazy, sort of very original and quirky character, but also he can play a totally normal person and like do a good job with it. So like every character that he plays, however, is a memorable character to me. I can't think of a single thing that Nicolas Cage has ever done or played in where the way he played it or how he played it wasn't very memorable. So, are the characters memorable and well acted? Yes, I think Cage's character is very memorable. Everybody else is just like solid supporting, but nothing. I take that back. I mean, Gleason's character, he does a good job. He's in that Irish accent the whole time, so sometimes it's kind of hard to understand what he's saying. But he does that really good, ruthless yet likable mob boss. Like he seems like a likable guy, who would be, fun to have a fun time with and be around and chit chat and like, but also like would not hesitate or be bothered by turning and slitting your throat at any moment. Like it's very, he does a really good job with that. Like you really like him 1 second and you kind of like, I like this guy. And then the next moment you're like, he's a total, like, ruthless, terrible human being. So like he did great with that. I think, yes, I don't think that there's any role or there was any person in this that did a bad job. So there's no like bad acting that I feel like happened in this. I think everybody did a solid job. I think there were some characters, some people who really shined in this. And then you had some that were just basic, your supporting actors who were just there and they did their job. One thing I'll say is the guy who was like kind of the Electro equivalent in this, I could not stand. From the moment that I saw him on screen, the way that he talked, the way that he carried himself, everything about that character, I just loathed from the get-go, which was the point. That was the purpose. He's the one guy who had powers that you were like, I hate this guy. I want him to die. You wanted everybody else to be saved. This guy was just a bad guy, and he died. So, like, they knew what they were doing. They gave you the character that was the one character that was going to get killed in a fight by the spider at the end of the movie, because he was not even the guy that you really wanted. You're like, hey, yeah, you can cure this guy, but he's still going to be just a complete, like, jerk anyway after the fact. So anyway, that character I couldn't stand, and he was killed off. But everybody did a solid job. It's meant to be played a certain way. I mean, Nicolas Cage played this a certain way, kind of like that, I'm the spider, see? That whole era, that whole noir 30s vibe. But that was intentional. He talked out of the side of his mouth, and he did it on purpose because he was going for that particular vibe. So it's kind of like when you watch Indiana Jones, and it's kind of feels like the old serials from certain time periods. That's what it's meant to be. It's not when you're doing a thing and you when you're shooting for something that may call for you to act a certain way or do a certain thing, but it's proper for your goal for what you're shooting for, then it like totally makes sense. So Nicolas Cage's character, if he was acting like that in like a normal situation or a modern day anything, it'd be a little weird, it'd be a little cheesy, it'd be a little cringy maybe or whatever, but like that's what this whole noir vibe was, and so he played it right. So I am, for characters and performances, I'm also going to give this a 4 because I think they were good and solid. I don't think there was necessarily anything iconic about any of it, but it was all solid and well done. I don't think anything fell flat or anything like that. Pacing and entertainment value. Were you entertained the whole time? Did it keep your attention? Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? I think I don't remember any points where I was just like super bored or this was super down for me. I don't think it felt like it just chugged along. But for a noir, I mean, how are you going to do that with like a noir type thing? So I think like for the type of thing this was and the story they were trying to tell, for pacing and entertainment value, I'm also going to give it a 4 because I think that there weren't any moments where I felt bothered or bothered by the pace of things or like, come on, let's speed this up, let's hurry up, let's go. I never felt that way about anything, but I also never felt like it was just some wild ride necessarily either. There were a couple of really good action sequences and things like that, but I never felt like it was a, hold on to the edge of your seat, let's go kind of thing. It just was well paced and entertaining. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 for pacing and entertainment value. Dialogue and quotability now. Are there iconic or memorable lines? Do people still quote it? Does the dialogue feel natural or cringy? Dialogue and quotability. Let's see. Are there iconic or memorable lines? I don't know about iconic or memorable lines. There's some memorable stuff in it. There's more memorable ways of. I'm trying to think here. Uh, I don't know that lines are memorable. It's more that the characters and the mannerisms of characters are more memorable. But that's a whole character and performance thing. So that doesn't really count. I don't think there's anything super iconic or necessarily memorable in any of this, but it is a television series. Do people still quote it? I don't think that maybe there's nothing really quotable in this. However, the dialogue, does it feel natural or cringy? If you pulled it out of the noir setting, it would. But in the setting that this is shot, nothing feels, when you're watching it, it's an expectation. So I can't say that it's cringy when you're expecting that, if that makes sense. It's hard for me to say, like, well, this is super cringy. Like, no, when you're watching, you want that. You want the noir vibes. You want some of that style stuff that you would otherwise say is very cringy. It would feel unnatural in this setting if some of that didn't exist. Some of the way that they talked and the stuff like that. So, like, I think for what they were shooting for, again, for dialogue and quotability, I'm going to give a 4 and say, whoops, thumbs up. Good. Nothing necessarily iconic, but it's solid and worked well. All right. Soundtrack and score. Does the music enhance the film or date it? Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film? In this situation, we're talking series here, but does the music enhance or date it? Does it elevate the emotional tone or feel out of place? Is it iconic or generic? I found myself, there's nothing super memorable. Like, I can't hum you any themes or anything like that right now. I wouldn't be able to hum you how anything went musically. However, I particularly remember while watching the series thinking, as music played while I'm watching it in the background, behind certain moments and things, I particularly remember, man, they did a really good job of making this feel like an old black and white 30s noir style thing. So it totally did its job, and it elevated the emotional tone of the series. It definitely was not out of place. It definitely wasn't generic. It just, I don't think, was iconic or super duper memorable or some kind of theme that I'm going to remember. I did really appreciate the intro sequence. There's some, song that's being played and someone singing. I did find that, like, I liked, it felt, very original, and I really appreciated the intro sequence and the song that went along with it. The score itself for, during the show, like I said, nothing was memorable in its theme, but I do remember feeling like, man, they did a really good job of, like, giving the right vibes with this music and setting the right tone with this music and giving and making and pulling you into that world of what they were trying to create. So for soundtrack and score, I am also going to give this thing a 4 and say solid, works well, nothing iconic, but they did a good job with it. Moving on to cinematography and visual style. Is it visually engaging or stylish, regardless of effects budget or genre? Do the camera work and effects still impress, or do they look dated or clunky? I think this really shines from a cinematography and visual style perspective. Obviously, from the beginning, they shot this with the intention for it to be black and white. So you have to light things differently for things to come out right and look proper on a black and white. So not only did they do that, they made the black and white look really good. I haven't watched it in the, true color, essentially the true color version of this. I would like to, see some of it, but it's my understanding that they colored it or colorized it in a way to make it look like it was a previously black and white film taken and turned into color, the whole Technicolor thing that they used to do. So I would like to see that, but they didn't even go like, hey, we just shot this in color here, so here you go. And like, no, they tried to colorize it in a way where it looks like a Technicolor film that was once black and white and made into color. Like if you've watched, I guess, The Wizard of Oz or some of the old, maybe, I'm trying to think. The Wizard of Oz, part of that movie was initially in color, part of it wasn't. I don't want to get off in the weeds on that. But anyway, there are some older films where when you watch it, there's, some of them are in black and white and eventually they colorize. I think like, It's a Wonderful Life and things like that I've seen them in color. But they were originally in black and white. However, I have not seen this in color, but that's what they supposedly went for. The black and white version of this looks really solid. They did a lot of work to light this properly so that it looks right in black and white, so that it wasn't just we shot it normal and then we put a black and white filter on it. That's not what they did. They shot it very intentionally. They locked off the cameras in many situations. There were some shots that literally looked like they could have been shot 100 years ago. Just everything. There's one particular shot that I remember that was locked off at the, and it was like an oil company sign, I want to say. But like, man, it was oil or gas or something like that. But it was a locked off shot, completely, it just looked straight out of one of those old shows. So they did a lot of that stuff, a lot of intentionally locked off shots. The way that there were the many reveals that happened coming out of the shadows, a lot of the Dutch angles that they chose to use, they just did a really, really good job of like going with that style. And I think even on top of that, they did a good job when it come to the special effects and kind of the makeup stuff. They didn't go over the top with anything. They didn't make anything feel too CG, where now they would, everything, like, for example, the Sandman would be morphing and changing and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. For the most part, you just saw his hands kind of become gritty looking, or like some patches on his face become gritty, but he never became entirely sand-like. He never, morphed out of being out, with the exception of one time at the end where he gets smashed and kind of falls into a pile of sand. You don't get a bunch of crazy stuff. So I can appreciate that for this style of film, for the style that they were going for, they also limited themselves or put some sort of like boundary around themselves for how far they would go with CG, and they made it look kind of like, okay, this is probably how it would have looked, or the way that they would have tried to do makeup or certain things back then. So I really appreciated that they didn't take it too far, that they limited themselves in how they would use CG to portray these super characters. I know they did a lot of practical stuff. They shot on a lot of backlot stuff. I know they shot on Paramount's backlot that was supposed to, that has a lot of those, I want to say like early New York vibes. It was just all really well done, really well shot, and very, very, very well done. So for cinematography and visual style, and for everything that they went through to do the best with this, I'm giving this a 5 out of 5 for cinematography and visual style, because they knocked it out of the park with intent and final product. There's a little bit of, him swinging around. They did a lot of wire work stuff and some really solid practical effects when it comes to him swinging and being the spider, but also there's a couple where he's like swinging through the city that you can tell is a CG body, and it doesn't necessarily move super duper realistic. It's a little too rubbery, but like that's totally okay. Everything is fantastic. So I'm giving cinematography and visual style a 5 out of 5. Originality and creativity. Does it feel fresh and inspired, or like something you've seen 100 times? Was it groundbreaking or formulaic? Does it bring something unique? Definitely fresh and inspired. In the world of superhero stuff, definitely not like something I've seen 100 times. Is it groundbreaking or formulaic? it's definitely not formulaic, and I think it's groundbreaking in the modern sense of getting away from your typical superhero world, coming from that Spider-Man universe, I think it's, I'm going to say groundbreaking in the entire approach to what they're doing, and it brings something unique. It says this is something that you would typically see in animation. And so the fact that they did this in live action is, I can't say enough good things about what they did. So for originality and creativity, I'm also giving this a 5 out of 5 and saying super fresh feel, very inspired, not formulaic, brings something totally unique. They were totally original in their approach, and to a character like this, to obviously there's modern day noir stuff. I'm talking about taking a character who is a comic book character who swings and is known for being totally different, creating a totally different vibe and character, and leaning heavy into they didn't even lean heavy into the spider stuff. They leaned heavy into the detective stuff. The spider was like a sort of a side part of it. It was a part of it, but it was not like the central focus of anything. So anyway, for originality and creativity, I'm giving this a 5 out of 5. Theme and message. Is there a deeper takeaway, and does it explore ideas that resonate today? I think there's a little bit of, you got to keep going message of like, you can't let things in life that are hard completely shut you down. And that no matter what you've been through, you can kind of, you can make an impact. You can do your best and try to, help others. Which is kind of obviously your superhero stuff. Even when there's ultimately this deep down, I've got to help. There's a responsibility thing. So for theme and message, I'm just going to give this. I'm going to give it a 3.5 and say, they weren't trying to give a message necessarily, but the message is, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's an expected thing in a movie or a show like this, a series like this. So 3.5. I'm not going to put it at just fair. I'm not going to put it at a point where I think they were like necessarily trying to have some super duper theme and message. 3.5 for theme and message. Number 9, the cringe factor. Are there any jokes, effects, or moments that haven't aged well, were always bad, moments that make you wince now? Can't be your cheesy bad effects, outdated jokes that aren't funny, etc. Funny enough, while I would say this would be a cringy thing. You put this in black and white, you give it the right setting, you know what you're shooting for. You give it an expectation of being an old 30s noir vibe. It's hard to feel cringy with a lot of it. So for cringe factor, there's a bit of cringe in general because that stuff has a bit of, it's kind of meme-ish or jokish. I mean, like, it's not uncommon for people to joke around and, say see after everything, I'm going to the store, see? Like that kind of thing. Like people joke about it, but so there's like some overall like cringe, but it's like a cringe that is appreciated for what it is. So anyway, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 for cringe factor. It doesn't feel super cringy. They did a good job with it. There's some stuff in it that is basic noir cringe, but I'm going to put it at 4 for cringe factor and say that where there is cringe, it's there, but it's meant to be there. But I have to at least say that it's there. So 4 out of 5. Nostalgia and rewatchability. Does it hold up to your memory of it? Does it still matter today? Is it timeless, or has it aged poorly? Does a rewatch ruin the magic? Would you honestly watch it again? Well, obviously this is brand new, so I can't have super duper nostalgia vibes on it. I can't. It doesn't take me back to childhood or anything like that. However, the noir vibe is kind of, there's some nostalgia there. I think it is what I wanted it to be. So it says, does it hold up to your memory of it? It held up to what I wanted it to be as a series. Does it still matter today? Obviously, it's brand new. However, I think the approach they took matters today because it tells the people in the industry, your formulaic crap that you keep doing that doesn't work. You can do interesting different things, and people want to see that. People want to see originality. People are kind of tired of just the rehashing of the same old crap all the time. People want some originality to things. And obviously, a Spider-Man type character is not original now, but having an original take on something, it's just like, it's the same as, anyway, I think it matters today, even though it's brand new. It matters today in that it makes a statement on what people want to see and are willing to accept, and the fact that this is rated so high and has been so wanted and been so liked tells the people in the industry, hey, we want some originality. We want something different, and we'll watch it if you'll just put the effort into making something solid and stop phoning everything in. So I think it does matter even today. Even with it being brand new, it matters today. And I think it could have an effect on, future projects and how well this is done. Is it timeless, or has it aged poorly? I mean, like, that's something cool about this. This is going to be a timeless kind of thing because the noir stuff is timeless. It's a certain genre that's always going to be appreciated, and it is what it is because that's what it is. So, like, I know that's a silly thing that just came out of my mouth, but it's true. I don't think this is going to age poorly because of, again, I think it's going to hold up. I think that it's going to be a thing that can be appreciated for a long time, no matter how effects change, no matter any of that, because they try to do things a particular way with it. I think it's definitely a rewatchable thing, and I'm going to watch it probably again, I'm sure. For nostalgia and rewatchability, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5, and saying that it brings nostalgic vibes, and it's a very rewatchable series, I feel like. Anyway, so yes, 4 out of 5 for nostalgia and rewatchability. And now, let's run through these and see what our score ends up being. All right, story and plot, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Characters and performances, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Pacing and entertainment value, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Dialogue and quotability, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Soundtrack and score, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Cinematography and visual style, I gave it a 5 out of 5. Originality and creativity, I gave it a 5 out of 5. Theme and message, a 3.5 out of 5. Cringe factor, I gave it a 4 out of 5. And nostalgia and rewatchability, I gave it a 4 out of 5, bringing the score to 41.5, meaning that this falls in the certified rewatchable category. Anything from 40 to 50 is certified rewatchable, and therefore now this is being this is a certified rewatchable series. This is the first series that I've covered on Rewatch or Return, and it is a certified rewatchable series so far. I don't know if they will continue this, if this will be a one-off. This may be a one-time, one-season series, or this may continue. We don't know yet. I guess we'll find out in the future. If you're watching this later on, then maybe there already is. If you're watching this way down the road for the first time, then maybe there are other seasons. But if not, then as it was a one season so far, it's been solid and I think very rewatchable. But certified rewatchable, 41 out of 50. I guess that would put it at an 83% on my own personal score. Scoring this stuff is always weird because I'm going by these categories, right? Like if you asked me and you said, "Hey, what would you score this?" I might score things a particular way, out, straight off the top of my head. If you said, "What's your score from 1 to 100?" I might give you a certain score. But then I want to take these categories and be very, I'll give you my objective score or my subjective score, I guess, on the top of my head, 1 to 100. But then I jump into these categories and I want to objectively score these categories and kind of let the score fall where it may, where the score that this comes out as, like I said, at 83%, might not, I'm doing that, I'm just doubling the 41.5 to get to the 83%. But where this falls like that, because I'm objectively trying to be objective about these categories, that's not always where my feelings are if I'm just doing one blanket rating. So it's kind of interesting to me to see where some of these end up falling on the final score versus where I might score them if you just asked me to give you a rating from 1 to 100. But anyway, it's still ultimately very subjective. It doesn't mean that it's better or worse than you think it is. It's just, these are just my scores. And that's what makes this fun. If you like this podcast and you don't mind, I'd appreciate it if you would follow the channel here. Also, you can go to Rewatch or Return on Instagram and follow the show there. If you would like to chit-chat about any of this, you can on YouTube. In the comments below, tell me what you think about the series. I'd like to have a conversation about that with anybody who wants to. And the same with anybody who's listening on the audio platforms, audio versions of this, audio only. You can go to Instagram and go to Rewatch or Return, and the post that is related to this particular episode, you can let me know in the comments underneath that how you thought and what you think about the series. But this is the first series that we've covered. I probably won't do a bunch of series stuff, but this being brand new and being so popular and being so easy and quick to just kind of run through and watch the whole thing real fast, I thought I'd go ahead and do the first series on here on Rewatch or Return. But that is going to be the end of this week's episode, and I will see you next week.